All right, this is the commentary track for Minerva Monster. I'm the director of the movie. My name is Seth Breedlove. I'm joined by Brandon Dalo. Brandon, what did you do?
I did the music for Minerva Monster.
And he's joined by Nathan Newcomer, who... What did you do, Nathan?
Not much. I kind of just hung out and popped in things from time to time.
And we are joined by Mark Matzke, who... I don't know that Mark, what was your, like... Did you have an official...
I did less than Nathan did. I didn't do anything. I wasn't even around.
I don't think that's true. You weren't around for the shooting necessarily, but you were around for the entirety of the production, especially like behind the scenes. Like you knew what was going on. So
yeah, well, we were recording Sasquatch at the time,
right,
and talked about it a lot on the show. So I think that was sort of a place to process where the production was at various times. So I did know stuff.
I would actually refer...
I've written about it now for the book.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I would refer to Mark as the Small Town Monsters historian. So like more so than me, because I forget all this stuff, or anyone else on the crew. Mark especially remembers everything about the making of these movies to an absurd degree, which you'll probably get a taste of today. So, all right, I'm going to start the movie. So in three, on the count of one, I'm going to hit. So 3, 2, 1, play, and Minerva Monster is underway. And this was before we had the animated logo that Adrian animated. So we're right into the movie.
Man, I haven't seen this in forever.
Yeah, you know, the opening still is solid. I still think the opening...
It's good.
Yeah, the opening minute and a half or whatever is fine. These shots are cool. And this is also the only part in the movie where I can tell people I directed this. Because these shots were all things... That shot especially, these were all things that I saw in my head one night when I was going to bed. And I couldn't figure out how to open the movie, and I told Alan about this opening that would feel like an old In Search Of episode. And this shot where... Is this a shot where... Does it pan into the woods and then zoom in, right? Is that this shot?
It's the one after this, I think.
Okay.
I know it ends like that.
Yeah. Those were all the things that I wanted to do. So this is the only part in the movie. Yeah, it's right here. Yeah, it pans and then zooms.
Mm-hmm.
This was all something that I saw. I just thought it would have this cool, like, 70s... And I think I talked a lot about In Search Of vibe.
The thing I like about that shot is at the beginning, it establishes how close you are to the Lincoln Street East. You know, like this is not a super remote location, but once you figure out, you know, where you are, it's like that. It's that close to civilization that these sightings are happening.
Yeah, it does a really good job of like establishing a sense of place, which has become one of our calling cards. This is a GoPro, which I now, like, one of my rules, one of my mandates on movies now is that we don't do GoPro footage, because I really don't like GoPro footage. It works on something like On the Trail Of, but if I did this movie now, this would never be in the movie. I wouldn't be able to deal with it.
The opening sequence is good, and then this here is my favorite song that you did, Brandon.
Yeah,
thanks, man.
Just a guitar duet. I don't know if you got that from like Glenn Frey or something like that, but
I had the song. I had like half the song written. I think I wrote this song when I was like 15 or so, like half of it. I never did the bridge, and then for this movie, I was like, oh, this is perfect. It just never found a home, you know.
And you did that with your dad, right?
Well, it was just me, but we recorded it. The actual recording that you hear is at my dad's cabin that he had for a couple of years. That we just mic'd it up and did it there, so that was cool. Yeah,
Didn't you and your dad though play that song together at one point?
We were trying to I was trying to get him to do like mandolin or add some other like folk type instruments on there, and we messed around. We just couldn't get it fully together. It just ended up sounding best like just a plain acoustic. in the future, if we ever revisit this topic or whatever, it could be cool to flesh that song out and do a whole different version or something.
There's a lot of things that are established with STM right out of the gate in this movie that we still do today, and we made a conscious effort going forward to get away from spending 20 minutes of the first part of the movie solely on the town's history, but we still, I think a lot of the stuff we established with this movie we still do today, just better. And for
helicopter shot.
Yeah, for background on what should have been a helicopter shot, those shots were from an airplane on what we later found out was like the windiest day that our pilot had ever flown on. And so when you're seeing the camera like zooming in and out and moving all around, it's because the pilot was like trying to keep the plane aloft. I mean, it was when we flew out of Salem, Ohio, and when we landed in Salem, when we took off from Salem, we took off at an angle. We took off like sideways. Like we were facing, when we got into the air, the plane immediately went sideways and we were just flying off. And I ate an entire pack of Tums in the back. I was in the back seat of the plane. I ate an entire pack of Tums because I was like, the entire time we were up there, I was about ready to hurl.
Well, I think the pilot was driving with one hand and then crossing himself with the other.
That was right before drone days. You know, it was like drones had just come out, but like they weren't super affordable or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like we talk about it all the time. Like SDM took off at just the right time. Like we wouldn't exist if this had started 10 years ago or even 8 years ago. But because of when we started out, it worked. Like we were able to shoot digitally. We were able to get stuff like drones. I mean, right away, like Beast of Whitehall, which filmed later in 2015, was the first time we used drones. We used a Phantom 2 with a GoPro attached, and that footage looks 1,000 times better than this airplane footage, which was literally I was sitting in the back seat with a Sony Handycam pressed up against the window, trying to like shoot the ground while the plane's going sideways and all this stuff, and Alan was hanging out the window with his like big Sony camera. Like literally, there's my second cameo in the movie right there, by the way. That's in that last shot.
Yeah, you just walked in front. You got a little butt shot earlier.
Yeah, little butt. But yeah, it was. I'm amazed the stock footage was as good as his. I forgot about this guy.
Your butt is kind of like Stan Lee in his movies. You just see it in every film.
Wade Mitchell.
I think that Minerva, or not, I was gonna say Minerva Monster Day. They're what was it called?
Oktoberfest, yeah.
I think those shots were the first day I actually met Seth in person at that car show. I think.
Yeah, we met at we met outside the museum or in the museum or.
We met like right in that main intersection in town where there's like the big clock.
That's right.
It was during the car show, and I just walked up and was like, "Hey," because you had told me you were going to be out there that weekend, and I was like, "Well, yeah, I brought my dad along, and we checked it out." But yeah, that was the first day we ever met.
Nathan, what days were you involved in the filming of this?
I was there at the car show.
So you were there for the car show.
I was there for the car show. I was there at the sheriff's house, which is coming up here.
The Caton's house. Oh no, you were at the sheriff's house.
No, I was at the sheriff's house. Yeah, not the Caton's.
You were at the Caton's house once, weren't you? Because we went back. Oh no, we parked somewhere.
Yeah, I was at the Caton's house, but I wasn't there when you actually interviewed him.
Okay.
I took a picture with his Sasquatch statue that's in front of his house, so you can see though.
So you were there for like 3 or 4 of the days. Right?
I was also there for the Mexican dinner afterwards.
Okay, after.
Yeah, I made sure I was there for that.
For the Mexican dinner after what?
After this whole thing, like everyone that was in the movie went and ate dinner at some Mexican restaurant. I sat by Barbara.
Yeah, it was. It was after Minerva Monster Day. We went to that. So this is Mark Matzke's, one of Mark's favorite characters. Do you want to talk about Roger, Mark?
Oh yeah. Tell me, how did you get his involvement secured? Was he like super excited to be part of it, or
He was, and I had heard about Roger because of his connection to the French gold. He had written these books, I think like 2 books or something, about the lost French gold, which is this famous local Minerva legend. And if you've got the DVD, then you've probably seen the cut sequence, which is like an 8-minute scene all about the French gold that has nothing. Anyway, I had contacted him very early on about being involved in the movie. He might have been the first person who said yes, because I think the initial cut of the movie was going to be Roger, James, and Barbara, and that was going to be the movie. And it was going to be like 20-25 minutes long and go on, we were going to put it on YouTube, was the plan. So Roger very early on was one of the first people I had say yes to being involved. And this is so... The first 2... Well, this movie is very different from everything that came after. I mean, even I was going to say Whitehall and Minerva, but it isn't. It's just Minerva. There's no one connected to the subject of Bigfoot involved in this. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got Paul Hayes, but he's in there solely as a witness, and I really like that about this movie. Like, there's no one that's like a Bigfooter or anything like that in this movie. It's just solely these normal small town people.
I think that probably comes out being the first one and being how this project started in general, with you wanting to write a book about small towns. I think the small town comes out more in this one than any of the other ones. It's more of a history than the rest.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, all the interviews were shot like in the same location. We haven't done that since.
The other thing that changed between I think it changed after Whitehall is these first 2 movies, this one and Whitehall, there was very little effort put into interview setups. It was basically just like, I mean, we started trying a little bit with Whitehall, but it was still like just the biggest thing was getting the interview. And that's what we do now with On the Trail of, but it wasn't his interview though. I still think his interview looks great.
Yeah.
It didn't start getting cinematic until Boggy. Now this night, who was there? Was this just so Adrian's in the car? You can see her in the car, in our car. I think
there's the Bigfoot statue too.
Yeah, I think that was just Alan McGargle, me, and Adrian, and Alan and I were up filming. And that might have been the night that we actually shot the opening scene with all the different shots around the house that opened the movie. But I can't. It's a lot of. I mean, 5 years ago, to me, all this stuff blends together.
What was it like being there for the first time?
I geeked out pretty hard. I don't know, other than Flatwoods, I can't think of another scenario where I showed up at a location of one of these things and felt that way. I just remember feeling really like you were on historic ground. I mean, maybe Abear Road, but like I had been into the story for a long time at that point, so like it was pretty cool. And it's also kind of funny because I had passed this house all my life and just had no idea, driven past this house on my way into Minerva, had no idea that's what it was. But yeah, I can remember. I think I actually got a bigger thrill out of going back to the pond, the quarry pond. I don't know why that was, but the pond was like kind of a bigger deal to me in some ways. What was it like? I mean, did you ever go with us during the filming to the Caton's house? I know eventually you went to the Caton's house, but
yeah, I wasn't able to be. The filming had kind of wrapped, like as I was kind of getting involved, and I did a few things with you guys. Like we went to the historical society and looked through old newspapers, and I was involved like at the car show, like I said, but I never got to go to the house during filming. It was only after the movie had come out that I was able to go.
Yeah, and
that was really cool. Like you said, it was just following it for so long, and then you get to actually be there, and it was a pretty surreal experience.
Hey, Seth, tell the story of how you got Jim on board, because I think it's kind of wild.
How did I get him on board, Mark? I don't remember this at all. What, like?
Really? Well, according to my information I have here, you actually did an internet search for him and found him on a New York Fire Department website.
Okay, that I do remember. Yeah. It was because of like 9/11, right, or something to do with 9/11 that I found him. He wasn't like listed. You couldn't find his phone number or anything by looking for it online. I found him through like a Google search or some sort of search listed on a New York Fire Department website, and that was the way I got in touch with him. And more than anything, he got a kick out of the fact that I even knew who he was or what his connection to the story was, and he was amazed that people were still talking about it. But having said all that, what's really funny is we found out recently James Shannon and my dad were classmates at Lincoln. So my dad and James Shannon are old friends. We were at Heggy's, which is like this ice cream place in Canton. We were at Heggy's right before the quarantine started, right before the COVID-19 lockdown started. It was my dad and I and Tommy, and we were getting up to leave, and James Shannon was sitting at the counter, and my dad and him like hugged each other, and I forgot to kind of like know it was the weirdest thing. And James was supposed to come to our Monsters and Mysteries event at the Canton Palace Theater and talk, but it was totally like coincidental. We ran into them, and then I remembered like my dad and him know each other from being classmates at Lincoln, which is super trippy to think of.
Yeah. Well, and a couple of things on that. One, Haggis has the best nuts, so if anyone wants to get some nuts, Haggis is the best. Two, I thought it was kind of interesting that he ended up living like he was almost neighbors with you for years. I thought that was kind of neat because you would have no idea this old sheriff that was sitting around was like 5 doors down from you.
When Adrian and I got married, he lived less than a football field's length from our house.
Yeah.
It's right at the top of the hill from the duplex we rented at the time when we were married. In fact, we used to walk by his house every day because we'd go for a walk. We'd take Ramona for a walk around the neighborhood, and we'd go through his neighborhood and walk right past his house. So it was kind of weird. Like there were a lot of coincidences with this. I'm pretty sure that Howie and his family are connected to my family through my Uncle Walter's kids, my dad's brother's kids. So but Brandon can speak to this. Like, Canton's a big city, but it's not that big. It's like kind of everyone is weirdly connected if you really look for it. Like it's a big town, but it's not that big.
Especially in Minerva's even smaller, obviously.
Yeah. Brandon, what? Talk about how you did approach the actual like construction of the songs for this movie. Like, how did you divide scenes? Because this is not like STM today is a lot more structured, and there's usually like chapters and stuff like that. And this movie isn't as structured. So how did you figure out where music was going to like start and stop?
This was very different. It was a lot of like just writing with an idea. There's a scene coming up here where I do the cue that's called hide and seek, because you had told me a story about the creature like watching the kids playing in the woods, hide and seek in the woods. So I just wrote a song that I was imagining that, wrote a song, and that ended up fitting with the scene. Or like Minerva, I wrote that separately from the image. So like, unlike all the future STM films, which I would score a picture normally, this was mostly writing. And I call them songs and not cues because I was still coming off the band and the producing days. So they actually had structures like verse, chorus, bridge. They would have it, in a film score or cue, you're not going to have that kind of same structure usually. So it was a lot of that. And then Alan would send stuff, and we just try to put it to picture. And that's one of the regrets with this score, obviously, because there's like 50 minutes of film footage or something as far as I remember, and I only wrote like 30 minutes of music. So there's scenes where it's just looped.
The worst is the most obvious is that we talk about this all the time. The mobile home park scene, which is just like that. It's like a violin song or something over and over. There's a
piano and violin cue, and it's bad. It's like we wish we would have had. I would have had enough skill at the time to write a full score for this, but it was all up in the air. We didn't know how long it was going to be, or like it was cool. That was a good learning experience.
The I get asked about the night vision shots a lot. I think those were shot the same night as that opening scene. We were there for like 4 hours that night, and I think the night vision camera shots were from that same night, because we weren't really at the Caton's house much. I think we were only there twice, and I don't. It wasn't like we spent a massive amount of time there. Maybe 3 times tops, and we went up in the woods with like a night vision camera, and Howie's daughter came up with us. So it was like Alan, me, and her, and we were up on the hill, like way back up in the woods after dark, and that was kind of cool because like you can. I always thought it was interesting. Those shots, I don't like night vision in our movies, but those shots are still kind of cool because you're almost seeing what the creature's vantage point would have been, looking at the house from the woods.
And as we all know, Bigfoot has night vision.
Yeah, exactly. Green night vision.
Well, one interesting technical aspect that I'm sure you can talk about too, Seth, is just how far technology's come in the past 5 years, even with just the easeability of getting decent cameras.
Yeah.
Like 5 years isn't that long, but in technical terms, the iPhone 6 was still the newest thing when this film started being shot.
Well, even between this and Mothman, which came out, I mean, we were filming Mothman less than a year and a half later, and we shot the bulk of our recreations in Mothman on an iPhone. So like, and you could not have done that at this point. The other thing is like drones, like we said, the cameras we were using, I didn't. The reason I didn't care for the cameras on this it's nobody's fault, and it's not an issue with like technology. It's just that the cameras that we had were all camcorders, and I realized really early on, I don't know, Brandon, I think you and I even talked about this back then, but I think very early on it bothered me that there was no depth of field on the interviews, that everything was kind of like that digital look to it.
Right.
And a lot of what I did the color grade on this movie with Luke Gall, and we kind of like washed it out, and we tried to give it this look like it's a 1970s movie, just to make it feel a little more like lived in and weathered and stuff. But yeah, the technology changed drastically between 2015 and 2016 when we made Boggy. All of a sudden we had gimbals. We were using A7S II, which almost allowed you a night vision shot without that night vision look. I mean, yeah, there was a ton of change in that period of time. Boy, that was a drastic. That last shot was like late fall, and all of a sudden that went into like very clearly the middle of summer.
This picture, though, this is one of a few pictures that you were able to uncover during this that I was kind of blown away by, because I don't think a lot of that stuff was public before the movie came out. Like the picture of the, spoiler alert, but the dog.
Oh yeah.
The bedding, like everything down here, the dog, the hole that the dog dug, the chicken coop, like. Seeing those pictures for the first time, I was like, wow, it just gave a lot of validity to the story. It's really cool to see that. Yeah,
that's all because of the Akron Beacon Journal. And, like, the Beacon's a legit newspaper, so for us to get to work with that stuff is almost unheard of, because typically with our productions, we have a really hard time getting permission to use that kind of... That's a bell outside my window here. We usually have a really hard time getting that stuff. They usually want massive amounts of money to license that kind of thing. Like, you remember, Brandon, on like Boggy Creek Monster, where you're trying to get news footage. There's an old news interview with like all these people that were originally involved in that case, and they wanted $50,000 for 1 minute of footage. So we got permission to use all this stuff because of Barbara and the archivist at the Akron Beacon Journal, whose son is the lead singer in the Black Keys. So I don't know. I still have my emails back and forth with that guy, but Barbara's the main reason. She contacted the Beacon for us and asked them if they would let us use this stuff, and they said yes. So we got all the footage. We got Denny Haas sketch and all that kind of stuff for free. Like, they give us... They signed a release, and it was like, you can use this pretty much for the rest of its life. So
forever,
perpetuity.
You started talking to her like long before the movie idea, right? I mean, that's part of what made that connection.
That was part of
happen.
The book proposal. Was Barbara? I had interviewed Barbara, and I had interviewed Howie's sister, whose name escapes me. Mark might know it.
Rebecca.
Becky Caton. I had interviewed Becky, done a phone call with Becky. One day I was on my way home from work, and I called her and did a. I don't know if you'd call it like a preliminary interview, because she wouldn't agree to do an actual interview, so it wasn't even. It's basically just a conversation where she told me all this, her remembrances of the case, and I remember getting super emotional talking to her, because it was like, by then I was really into the story, and I talked to her long before Howie, and I remember she told me, "You'll never get anyone in this family to talk about this on camera." But yeah, I had interviewed a lot of what we ended up with. I mean, I don't know, I hate to toot horns or anything with this movie, but if you like the movie and you consider it a success, a lot of that is because of Barbara and James Shannon and Howie. Like, those three kind of form the foundation of the whole movie.
Yeah. Those parts there with Mark Harris's paintings are my favorite parts in the movie. The one that just showed, which I actually have sitting beside me here.
Oh yeah.
And then the dog
Harris.
one coming up. Matt Harris, sorry.
Yeah.
Matt Harris. Those are my favorite parts.
Is that, you have a Bigfoot hanging behind you? Is that from Minerva?
Yeah, it's got Matt's signature down here at the bottom too. It's authentic.
No, the Bigfoot. The Bigfoot hanging behind you.
Yes, that is from Minerva Monster Day.
Nice.
So we need to talk about Minerva Monster Day before this is over. I don't know when to do that. I guess we'll wait more towards the end. But the day we shot Howie Caton's interview, I've told this story before, but the day we shot Howie's interview, he had been really reticent to agree to do it, and I basically had to talk him into it on the phone. He finally agreed, and the day we showed up to shoot his interview, we got all our gear out. We're walking up to the front door, and he was like, "I changed my mind. I don't want to do it." And so I was like, "We better go inside and talk, and maybe I can talk him into this." So him and I went inside, and it had nothing to do with me. It ended up being his wife that like convinced him to do the interview. So we managed to get him involved in the movie because of his wife. We're getting a ton of questions on Facebook, including one from Lauren Coleman. Mark, you might be able to help me answer this too. Lauren wants to know, have any comparative timeline analysis and comparative graphic illustrations between Minerva Monster, Sister Lakes, and Monroe, Big Muddy Monster, and Momo been included in any updates? I don't know what he means. Timeline analysis and comparative graphic illustrations between... No. Right? I haven't done that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have not seen anything approaching that, but that would be an interesting undertaking for sure.
I think that was something like that would have originally fit into that Rise of the Monsters episode and On the Trail of... And there's the pictures Brandon was talking about with the dog and the hole that was dug under the dog's house. That would have fit into that Rise of the Monsters. Mike Warholic said, "Did you make any attempt to contact the neighbor who got hit between the eyes with a rock, or attempt to locate the pictures they said they took when one of them was bitten by the monster?" Mark, do you want to tell the story about the lady who got hit between the eyes with a rock? The story about Lauren?
Well, it's in the movie, right? I mean, it's how he talks about
the
okay,
actual story.
And I don't know.
At the I thought you were there for this, but maybe you weren't. At the 2016 Minerva Monster Day, a lady came up to Lauren Coleman and introduced herself as the daughter of the lady who got hit between the eyes with the rock, and she then proceeded to introduce Lauren to the lady. So she was there. She corroborated the story, which is one of the wackiest stories in the movie, like the most sort of like outlandish kind of stories in that movie.
Right.
Totally corroborated that story and said everything was true that they were saying about that. So For some reason, Mark, I thought you had that. You were there for that. I don't know.
No, Andy might have been there at the table.
That's probably
when that happened. Yeah.
Robert Solomon, how do you feel you have evolved as a filmmaker from Minerva Monster to now? I think Brandon and I could both talk about that one too. And actually, Mark and Nathan as guys that, I mean, Mark's been on crews and Nathan watches our movies occasionally.
I've seen a couple.
Yeah. How do you feel you have evolved as a filmmaker? I don't really, I don't know how to answer it, because the biggest thing is like, I don't know. Brandon, how do you feel you've evolved as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, just doing, how many movies have we done so far? Like 10 or 11 or something like that?
We're on the 10th right now, yeah.
Working on the 10th. So, just doing it for the last 5 years, obviously you're getting experience and knowledge and learn how to do it and that kind of thing. Plus, obviously, I've been in school now for over 3 years, getting a film scoring bachelor. So learning the ins and outs of music theory, which I didn't know much about at all, and how to score a picture and that kind of thing, just grown exponentially since this film. Still got a lot of room to grow, obviously, and a lot more to learn. But, I look back on affection with the score. I think there's a couple cool parts and whatnot, but, there's just so much growth I think that's happened. Since, like you said, though, it's hard to put into words your own growth without sounding without, ego boost or whatever.
I think Brandon and I, too, are in the same boat on this, where I don't think either of us are, like, happy where we are as creators. So you never really get to a point where I'm, like, satisfied with my growth. So it's hard for me to talk about how I've grown. I can say I did not feel like I did any filmmaking in Minerva Monster. It wasn't until Beast of Whitehall that I felt like I was actually had any kind of creative control over anything. And I'm not saying that as like a put down on anyone. It's just the way it was. Like the nature of how we made this movie meant that I did not have much creative control over it. So, I mean, I could see growth from Minerva to Whitehall, but it wasn't even growth. It was just change. I wanted depth of field in the movies, and I wanted them to look cinematic. And that was like from Minerva to Whitehall, and then from Whitehall on, you can track that change. Like you can track us continuing to try to create more and more cinematic movies every single time we start making one of these. So I don't know, like storytelling, I think there's been a lot of growth because I'm just constantly trying to find new ways to tell stories, and I think we're all doing that. But I think the biggest, honestly, that brings up, like, I think the biggest growth is the team. Like, as a team, that's where the growth has happened is, like, you've got all these people involved that are exponentially talented and who continue to grow with every movie. Like, you look at, like, Jason with, like, sound. Like, picking up the sound and, like, figuring that out movie to movie. It's the same as like Brandon with the scores and how they continue to get better and better and change all the time. And so it's, across the team, I think you can see that as we pick up more and more talented people, the movies just get better and better technically. That doesn't mean that my favorite STM movie is Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. And then, I really love Beast of Whitehall too. So, and those, from a technical standpoint, I don't think you can say those are the best. So, Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think you said it a couple times, the cinematic. It's evolved towards a very cinematic approach, and it's just the result of, the collaboration that STM is. Like, as Brandon learns and grows, I think the thing that jumps to mind is the prologue to Terror in the Skies. Like that being an emblem of where STM is evolving towards and continues to go, is using those sort of storytelling techniques to set up, the other parts of the story. Whereas here in Minerva Monster is really very, very much a straight documentary approach, like just the facts, if you will. And that's the evolution, the growth is in terms of a very cinematic movie like storytelling narrative approach, and Momo being sort of that times 100, actually trying to do a story and embed that in the rest of it, kind of gives you a sense of where it's gone and where it continues to go.
Momo's an interesting dichotomy with Minerva too, because they came out 5 years apart essentially, or were started. They came out basically in a 5-year window. If you look at when we started filming Minerva and when we put out Momo, it's 5 years, and the stories are so similar. One family, monster on the hill.
Yeah.
And they could not be more different. Like
right.
They're like Momo's like Bizarro, Minerva Monster. Like,
yeah.
It's like the opposite.
Sure.
In most ways. Nathan, what about you? You want to chime in here?
Well, you guys touched on a lot of stuff. Obviously, technically, like we've already talked about, and even things that we mentioned before with the lighting, especially like in Barbara's interviews, the lighting's pretty rough, and obviously we've come a long way on that. Storytelling wise, I think your movies now have a better flow to them. And in this one, especially this part we were just into, where it cuts into the interviews in the trailer park, it's kind of abrupt with the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So I think just storytelling wise, you got a lot better at blending it together. But I don't think you can underestimate how much of a grassroots project this first one was.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think you had ever done any. You used Premiere Pro for this, right?
I didn't edit it. That's why I'm saying, like, I edited this. I helped edit this through notes and then taking trips up to Alan's house to make sure he was the one editing.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I had made some like short videos in college for a class, but I didn't even really do anything with this one as far as the editing goes. But yeah, on that aspect of it, there was almost zero experience, I think, on putting this thing together.
Yeah.
So when you consider that, and like Brandon mentioned earlier, the first time he even met you was at the car show when we were doing filming.
Yeah.
When you consider how small this whole thing started, it actually, and put it in perspective, it's actually kind of amazing how well it turned out.
No narration too, by the way. Like that stands out today even, is that there's no narration to tie these threads together. So the way the story's edited had to be pretty clear cut, which is difficult because you're dealing with multiple characters and all these, stories across like a decade or more. And I do love that storytelling in this movie, that there's no narration. I would love to get back to trying that at some point, like to do another STM movie. At the same time, I've complained about the no narration because it not that this movie didn't do what it was trying to do right. It did with the no narration, but having no narration left so much of the actual story on the floor because we couldn't fit it in there because it wasn't talked about by any of these people. So you've got, I mean, you've got all the like weirder, stranger pieces of the puzzle. The UFO crash across the house or across the street from their house. You've got there's you could have fleshed out the family better. Because Howie was really reticent to talk about the family and how they dealt with things too. So you get to know them, but you don't really get to know them. I think with narration, you could have learned a lot more about them just through, like someone telling those pieces of the story.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just interview yourself in a future movie.
I would just spend the whole time complaining about the movie. I'm hard on this movie for some reason, but it's not I don't know. It's not a bad movie. I've always said the only reason I'm hard on it is just because there's a lot of things I would have liked to have seen included that didn't get included. I think, Brandon, one of the questions we got that I want you to talk about is if there's still activity there today, and you actually learned some stuff after the fact about what goes on at the Caton's house up till today.
Yeah, I was able to, after Minerva Monster Day, the Caton family all came out and saw the movie, and after that, I think they saw that we showed them in a respectful way, and they were much more apt to want to kind of hang out with us, and they invited us over. We had a big fire and everything, and we actually took a big hike up into the woods that lasted into the night, and heard all kinds of stories and stuff. There's a lot more activity going on there. It's, from what they say, than just the Bigfoot stuff. They hear like like a weird humming noise. Like when activity starts, they hear like a weird humming noise, and they can't pinpoint where it's coming from. They've seen like women on like a woman on a white horse come, and then like as soon as they turn around, she's gone, and like hear chanting, and so there's all this kind of like ancillary activity happening too. But yeah, as far as the Bigfoot activity, it seems like it's still occurring to this day as well. They mentioned stuff like there was one night they were out on their roof, just like hanging out. Him and his cousin, Howie and his cousin, were hanging out. It was at the middle of the night, and they had a light that shines over their yard, and they could see their shadows because light was from behind them going out into the lawn, and they saw like a shadow behind them. And when they looked, there was nothing there. Like that kind of story. So there seems to be a lot of activity still happening. So
we're into the Paul Hayes. This is the sort of the modern day. This is like one of those things that a lot of people really enjoy about the movie, and for me as the director, I don't like this part of the movie. It's not Paul's fault. It's not Paul's fault.
Paul was fucking the whole time.
It's not Paul's fault. I just feel like that part of the movie becomes a Bigfoot movie, and it feels different from what the rest of the movie is. So it's like one of those things where if I had it to do over again, I probably would not have this interview in here. It also goes a lot longer than some of the other interviews in the movie, so you spend a lot of time on this interview.
The shot of him hiding in the trees is pretty cheesy.
Yeah.
It's coming up here.
No, we missed it. It was back there.
Yeah, it's already
it already passed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think there was a report too recently, wasn't there, Seth, of somebody seeing something in Minerva walk across the street, it was like an article or something too.
Yeah, there was. I think it was about a year ago or something. There was another. It might have been longer than that, but there was another Bigfoot sighting out there. So yeah, for sure, there's still a lot of activity out there. And the other thing that I always point out to people is you're only like as the crow flies, you're like 20 minutes from Salt Fork. Like if it takes a lot longer than that to get there from Minerva, but if you look at a map, it's not far at all. So there's a lot of activity that still goes on out there. I want to talk about Minerva Monster Day because it's such a big part of this movie and like our experience making the movie. But before we get to that, we did the premiere of this was at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. We're all four of us there. We were all four there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was there.
Okay. I don't remember anything from that night other than the fact that like Shannon Legros was there with us. So I remember Shannon being there. But I don't remember much about it. So if you guys want to talk about the premiere, I don't remember jack squat about that day.
You want to talk about OBC or the
yeah. No, we'll talk about Minerva Monster Day in a second.
If you want to go back one step before that, in March, late March, the Akron Beacon Journal ran a front page story about the movie, and I think that helped pump up the response at OBC because not only did it appear on Akron Beacon Journal front page, but it got picked up by the Associated Press. So that what Nathan was saying before about it being a grassroots effort, I mean, that's one of the most remarkable aspects of what happened with Minerva Monster is that it went from being just some guys making a project to being a front page a national story. Like within the wake of it happening and not even being released yet, it was blasted all over the United States. So then that leads up to May 16th, which is when it was premiered at OBC.
Okay. The only thing I remember is an applause. There was a big applause when the movie started and then when it ended. That's the only... I don't remember anything else. I do remember that was also the day where I decided we were making Beast of Whitehall as the next movie.
Oh, and also... what was the guy's name from Beast of Whitehall that passed away that same day?
Is that Paul Gosselin? Yeah, Paul Gosselin died that same day.
So that was a huge blow for us wanting to do Whitehall.
Yeah.
That day. I remember that was a great day, man. It was a packed room. There was like 500 people in there or whatever. We didn't know what to expect, and it was. I was gonna share this one random. I went to Asia. Do you remember this when I was actually? Well, that's a crazy story too, because it's like I had this backpacking trip already planned. We were getting to the deadline. I had a couple cues to write, so I was like in Asia on my laptop when I had downtime writing cues for this movie. But I was in the Philippines in my last stop, and I must have got bed bugs there, and I brought them back home, and I started getting these bites. And so it was right before the premiere, so I was actually, I don't know if you guys remember, but I had like a super long sleeve shirt, and I was trying to hide these bed bug bites in front of 500 people. I had one on my eyelid right here, so I like was so terrified people would see it.
Oh my gosh.
But anyways, it was a great day. It was the first time we realized like, wow, we've done something that people seem to be responding to, and you know, it made us want to go forward, I think.
Yeah, and I had never been to the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. I didn't even know it existed until Seth told me. So I went down there. I stayed in a cabin with Seth and his parents.
Oh, that's right.
For like 2 nights. And it was pouring down rain. We were trying to transport boxes of T-shirts in and posters. It was a downpour. Yeah. And you were running around talking to people and like wheeling and dealing. I was sitting at the table all day selling stuff. It was like 12 straight hours.
You
I was sitting
Andy.
there selling stuff. It was me and Andy. Yeah, I didn't even eat lunch or anything. It was just nonstop. And then you'd come back for like 5 minutes and be like, all right, I got to go head over here to stay here. And I still have the little placard thing, this little postcard.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
2015. And yeah, like Brandon was saying, we went into the big room that they were premiering the movies in. And I don't even think you sat in there, did you, Seth? You were too nervous to even be in there, I think.
I never sit in for any of our movies.
Yeah, you were outside. I was sitting in there, and like you said, everyone was kind of engaged with it. They were asking questions, laughing if something was funny, and then at the end they all started cheering. Yeah. And like Brandon said, I think that was kind of the first time you realized, like, hey, you know, this little piece of work actually might be something.
Mark, anything else you remember?
Oh yeah, I sat in the back with Matt Harris and we watched it.
Yeah.
And it was cool. I mean, it was like you guys said, I remember, you know, it was packed out and you could hear a pin drop, you know, for almost all the movie. When there were like funny moments and things like that, people did react and they laughed. But for the most part, it was like people were holding their breath. Like I just got that sense of rapt attention, and then there's the Q&A afterwards, and there really was a sense like this could really be something. And at the time, I mean, it's like Ohio is kind of the place to be as far as Bigfoot study, and this community was like really on the move and like doing important things. You really had that sense that night that something was taking off.
Minerva Monster Day, we started planning in February, I want to say, Mark. I don't know if you even know that, but that seems like a pretty inside baseball thing to know. I think it was like February that we started planning it, and we had literally hundreds upon hundreds of ticket requests. So what we did is when that Akron Beacon Journal, that's right, so it was in the Akron Beacon Journal, people needed to email me personally if they wanted a ticket. And we had hundreds. I mean, like my email box was full of hundreds of ticket requests. So Minerva Monster Day happened on May 16th, you said?
June 6th.
June 6th. Wow.
2015.
Okay, Ohio Bigfoot Con. Okay. June 6th, we did Ohio Bigfoot, Minerva Monster Day, which was basically like, we turned it into like a mini downtown festival in Minerva. And Minerva was happy. The town itself was thrilled that we were there. The people that we needed to support the event really didn't care. Like they didn't think it was going to be anything. So I was like, I wanted to turn it into a Bigfoot festival in downtown Minerva, and they essentially wanted it to just be this little event on the street. So they would not close down the street. They refused to close down the street, which is an exceptionally busy street. It's actually like trucks go down it all day and everything. So they wouldn't close down that street, and we had this event go down. I remember in the weeks leading up to it, we set up whoever owns the dojo, the karate dojo down there, was letting us use that as like the place where people were giving talks and stuff. So there were talks taking place at the dojo. There were all these local businesses that were running like promotions and stuff. The IGA was doing Minerva Monster Day cakes and cookies with like the Minerva Monster on them and stuff. But we didn't know what was going to happen. And so like the day of the event comes, and there's vendors set up down the sidewalks, and like it was honestly like a safety hazard. It really was. Like to this day,
Don't forget the guy dressed up as a Bigfoot.
Yeah, there was a dude
walking around into like McDonald's.
Yeah, he did that for weeks leading up to the event. There was a guy, part of their promotion for the event was that this dude dressed up like Bigfoot and wandered around downtown Minerva, and if you saw him, you like won something. So like,
I'm pretty sure at one point we were driving down there. I don't even know if it was the day of the event, but we saw him at McDonald's and he asked for a ride, and we like picked him up and drove him somewhere.
What?
Yeah, that was the thing. It was like some teenager.
Okay.
Nice.
Oh, I do remember that. Okay, so like, it was become, and the other thing is like, Mark stated it was a national thing, and it was a national story, but locally it was like a phenomenon. Like Q92 was doing call-ins for people to talk about if they had seen Bigfoot, and they were just talking. I mean, it was like free advertising for our event and the movie, and it was everywhere. Like everyone was. I was at the time I was working at a medical billing firm up in Akron, pretty far away, and people would come in and be like, "Hey, I heard them talking about your movie on the radio today," and they started hanging posters for the movie at the medical billing place I was working at, and all kinds of stuff. But like, Minerva Monster Day comes, and I don't know what was going on. I was in the theater, and it was like the event had started, and the first screening was going to start, and I was in the theater, and someone, I think it might have been Mark, someone came in and said, "You need to go out and see what's going on outside." And so I went out the back exit of the Roxy and came around the block and up the side where the Historical Society was. And as soon as I came around the back of the building, people were lined down the sidewalk, like on top of each other in this line that had to have been 400 people. Like, because what happened is we had said you had to request tickets to go. And people, the hundreds of emails we got weren't even all the people that wanted to see this movie. So what ended up happening is we had 3 screenings scheduled. We ended up doing 4, if I'm not mistaken. Did we do 4, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. So
you did.
We did
You added one.
So in the middle of the day. We had an emergency screening in the middle of the day because all these people would come to just like walk in and get tickets, and they couldn't get tickets. So then you've got hundreds of people just thronging downtown Minerva where they haven't closed the main street.
There's a picture on Facebook of it somewhere too, of it wrapped around the building.
Yeah, and people were like trying to cross the street in front of traffic and then go, because there's like we had Bigfoot speakers doing talks at the dojo across the street. There were vendors lining the streets, and that moment is the first time I remember thinking that we had made a movie. Was that day? It was like because up till then, it just never. This footage is horrendous. Oh my gosh! Up till then, it just hadn't connected with me that what we'd just done was make a movie. It was like this fun little project I was doing with my buddies. It just never was a movie.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, the OBC, it was like that was great, but it could have been just because everybody was already at the conference. Yep. They would have watched whatever film was premiering. But the Minerva Monster Day was the first time that I was like, oh, this is a real thing. People are really responding to it, and I think it's probably not over dramatic to say that was probably the moment that I decided to make film scoring in my career, and like actually, I mean, I didn't fully 100% commit until Mothman, but it was the first time that I thought, this is the direction I need to go. I mean, it was really that kind of powerful, just to, not to be over dramatic or whatever, but I remember that being a really cool event. All the family came, everybody was there. But I mean, I was so stressed, I'm sure you were too, where it was like, I thought it was going to be 3-4 people, like our friends, like your dad would come, like maybe, like my dad would come, and that'd be it. And we'd be like, so whatever, but it ended up just being blown away.
Yeah, I think that we figured the theater seats 170 some people. I can't Mark might know this. It was like 177, right, Mark? Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, or less.
And there were people standing in the first couple showings. Like, it was so packed that people were standing in the back. I think the last showing was the only one that wasn't completely sold out, where it wasn't completely full, and there were still like 90 people in the last showing. Mm-hmm. So throughout the day, they figured there was at least 1,200 people came into downtown Minerva to watch this movie that has just ended, and so it was pretty crazy.
Oh, check out my name spelling here.
Yeah, there he is, Nathan.
Oh, that's a classic.
Newcomer.
Nice. That's almost as bad as Hal and Jesse getting the CD made for me of my score, and my name on the CD is Brando Dalo. Yeah. It was like my first CD, like physical CD I'd ever had, and I wanted to sell it to people or whatever. There's Brando Dalo on it.
Got a nice ring to it.
There's our Kickstarter. So this was kickstarted, like everything we've done. And there's a lot of people that still back our Kickstarters today who backed this, which is pretty cool. Like that dude, Jay Cornelius, I worked with him. He used to have my Minerva Monster poster hanging in his... There's Mark Matzke. He used to have my Minerva Monster poster hanging in his cubicle at the office. But...
Did you see Adam Dugan's name?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah, it's 5 years of Minerva Monster. I know we probably could have talked a lot more about the making of it, but in all honesty, Mark is like, you're going to get a lot more insight into the actual making of this when you get, if you're getting the Making Monsters, the book that were the 5-year retrospective book, because Mark's got an encyclopedic knowledge of this stuff, and I just don't remember a lot of the actual stuff that went on when we were making this.
How's the book coming along?
She's hard at work on it today, actually, so I'm trying to figure out how to stop sharing my screen on here. But yeah, it's coming along really well. It's
cool.
It's going to be really cool. I can tell you the layout and stuff is crazy. Like, it looks like, I think I've shown some pages to Mark.
Yeah.
I need to send you guys some updates. Yeah, it looks really good. So,
awesome.
Well, thanks for tuning in for Minerva Monster 5-year retrospective. I feel like we need to wrap this up somehow, though, rather than just like 5 years later. Favorite memory of making the movie, Brandon?
Oh, jeez. Man, put me on the spot. Probably Minerva Monster Day. Or you mean actually during the production?
It doesn't matter.
Minerva Monster Day is probably the best moment for me in this whole thing. But just being able to do my first film score. A lot of people who are trying to get into it are always wondering, like, how do you get your first project? They might be studying for years. It's like, how do you just get that first thing? So this was really important for me, and that first step in this direction I've taken in my life. So yeah, I don't know, that'd probably be one of my favorite things too.
Nathan, favorite memory of making
it? Just spending time with you guys. No, when you asked me to do this, we had been friends for a while, and you were like, "Hey, you don't have a job? Come hang out." And I honestly didn't think it was going to be anything. I was just like, whatever. You're just filming some random stuff. This is never going to take off. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't think any of you guys thought it would turn into what it has. No, if you're looking back at it, none of you would have said it would have turned into what it is right now.
No.
And I was just like, all right, let's just hang out. We'll just film some stuff. It'll put it together. It'll be fun spending time together. And I think, like Brandon was saying, when you got to the Ohio Bigfoot Conference and when you got to the Minerva Monster Day, you realized, oh, wow, this is more than just a couple dudes sitting in their garage, playing instruments. This actually turned into something.
Mark?
And then I promptly decided to leave and never helped out with anything else.
Mark, favorite memory relating to Minerva? I don't know how to word that question for you.
Yeah. Well, I part of it is just Minerva Monster Day. I think the being overwhelmed by the public turnout for the whole thing. And also, just on a personal note, I think being able to be a person to link Matt Harris to you.
Oh yeah.
And to see where that's gone in terms of his involvement in the film since then was just really cool. Because being able to link friends who have similar interests and help that collaboration happen was really cool.
Yeah, I just finished, so I'm doing a book interview with Steve Bissett that's now north of 80,000 words. And we just finished talking a lot about Matt Harris because of his work on Terror in the Sky, so that's a big...
Sweet.
Yeah, and for me, I don't want to give the same answer that you guys did. So I'll say, for me, I think that my favorite memory is the day that we got Howie Caton on board. That we probably the day that we actually recorded his interview. So I can remember being so excited about the fact that we had him in there that all of a sudden the idea that this would be that this would be more than just a YouTube short kind of was in my head. So yeah, it'd probably be that day. But Minerva Monster Day too. But
yeah.
Well, all right, Minerva Monster, you can watch it free on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube in the comments right now complaining about the fact that we're talking over the movie, you can watch the movie free right here on YouTube. We had a lot of that with the Boggy Creek Monster commentary. So you can check out all of our stuff at smalltownmonsters.com. You can find it on Amazon. You'll be able to find it in a lot more places pretty soon. More info on that coming, hopefully this week. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. We're going to do more commentaries. I know we want to get to Beast of Whitehall. I think the next one is going to be Bray Red Beast. And you're going to want to watch that as quick as possible because it's not going to stay up very long because of distribution rights. So once we post that, it might only go live and then never come back. So, and that might be the way we do these commentaries, honestly, going forward. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me, Brandon, Mark, and Nathan.
Yeah.
You got it.
All right, I'm shutting down the recording.